Many warned him to be quiet, but he cried out all the more. See, Bartimaeus was determined and he was full of faith. Son of David, have mercy on me. So Jesus stood still. And that's where the story shifts. Jesus heard and Jesus stood still. Bartimaeus could not see Jesus, but he heard that Jesus was there. He heard the voices. He heard the discussion. He heard the chatter. I'm just imagining, but you know that people were saying, hey, isn't that Yeshua from Nazareth? Isn't that, didn't he? And he's hearing all of this. So Bartimaeus lays aside what he does not have, which is his sight, and he plugs into what he does have, his limited ability, which is his hearing. And he subsequently releases what he does have, which is his voice. And he lays that out and he cries out and he disregards what he's hearing, people discouraging him. And what happens? Jesus stands still. Why? Because Jesus heard. Hey, this is Megann Marcellino, and I want to welcome you back to Generations at the Table. Thank you so much for pulling up a seat with me today. Today, I want to talk to you about the story that we read in Mark chapter 10, which in my Bible, it says, Jesus heals blind Bartimaeus. And I had my Bible open sitting on my desk the other day, and for some reason, my eyes just caught this story. And so I began just reading it. I was sitting at work and in between meetings, and I began reading it. And you know how sometimes the word, it is living, and it is true, and it is a sword. So it just like cuts through you, and you begin seeing it differently. And I love how rich the word is. Like, I don't know about you, but I love being able to read the word, like a big section of it. Like, if you've ever done like the Bible in a year or something like that, where you're just, you read multiple chapters every day and you see it from such a different angle. But then there's also this, where you just like get into that parable and you dive in and you begin thinking about the culture of who, the word was being spoken to and what was going on in their lives, and getting to like wonder a little bit about these people and what these words of transformation meant for them. I mean, there's just like, sometimes it's like, oh, I could just dive into a couple verses for all day. And that would just be such rich study. And so for me, I was like reading this story of, which immediately in the headline, it's blind Bartimaeus. So Bartimaeus was identified by his disability. And I started to think, when have I seen myself in light of some type of disability? When have I seen myself in light of something that I didn't like about myself? And then what does Jesus do in response to that? How does Jesus offer me transformation? How does Jesus offer us renewal? So that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today. But in the beginning, it's like the setting is Jericho. And so my thoughts are, what does Jericho represent? Jericho was a walled city. It represents a fortress. It represents a battle. It represents a place where there was faith, and God said, march around in silence. So obedience. And then there was a miracle. But Jericho, it is an obstacle, right? And it is marked as that. So here he is. He's in a place of an obstacle in his life, which we know is related to this blindness. And he's not just blind, but he's completely defined by this condition. As we read later in the story, he's wearing a cloak, which some say was like a beggar's cloak. And when Jesus calls him, he lays it down. And so we'll jump more into that. But this idea that we can be so defined by that which hinders us. I began thinking about the story of like Pilgrim's Progress, where I don't know if you've ever read it. If you haven't, you definitely should. But things were labeled by their emotion or their experience. There was much afraid. And so I began to think, what if I was defined by fearful Megann, angry Megann, the one who thinks she's not enough Megann, overwhelmed Megann, all of those things, right? Those things that we feel that hold us back. Like, we do not want to be defined by them. So what does it take? How can I be like Bartimaeus? How can I lay aside that label and call out for the Lord in faith? So Bartimaeus met his moment of limitation with faith by crying out. Even when the crowd tells him to be silent, he continues to cry out. So many of us, I believe, we carry these labels and these invisible wounds. Maybe it is something that somebody called you in elementary school. Maybe it is a situation with your parents where they labeled you as something. Maybe it was something with a teacher or an aunt or an uncle where someone said that you were slow or you were stupid or you weren't a good reader or you weren't good at math or you're not good at this or you're always causing problems or why are you doing this and why are you the way that you are? Those words stick with us and they become labels that we carry throughout our life. But we can learn so much from Bartimaeus that we choose to use what we do have, which was in his case, his hearing, to overcome that obstacle, to overcome that Jericho moment. None of us are too broken or too late to be redeemed. I'm going to say that again. None of us are too broken or is it too late for us to be redeemed and to have these labels removed. You may be walking or listening and thinking, hey, I've walked around with this label for my whole life. I am in my 70s now. I am in my 50s now. I am, 30 years old, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. These labels do not have to stick with us to the grave. We can get rid of them now. It is not too late. Bartimaeus' name means son of the unclean. And he's not even called by his name. He's called as the blind man. So not only did they lose his name in the midst of this, but he came labeled again by this disability where he had lost all about him. So he was basically the blind man, son of the unclean. Can you imagine if that was all people talked to you about was you are XYZ, daughter of, something in a negative way. But Jesus, what does Jesus do for this man? I want to encourage you that you are not your struggle, that you are not your false label and your identity. And just like what Jesus did for Bartimaeus, which was much more than just heal him, Jesus transformed him and changed his identity. Just like what Jesus did for Bartimaeus, he wants to do for us. I think we can struggle when we're busy and you're overwhelmed. I said overwhelmed, Megan. That's something that I struggle with. I struggle with feeling overwhelmed. I struggle with feeling like I'm not enough. Maybe there's just not enough of me to go around, right? I'm an only child. I'm a working mom. Our kids are being homeschooled. We have 4 babies. I'm a wife. I'm just telling you things. And these are not hard things. These are blessings in my life. I am incredibly blessed of the Lord. I am in no way complaining. I'm just saying that there's a lot of moving parts and spinning plates. And I'm sure that you can relate to that wherever you are in your life, where there's just a lot of hats to wear. There's a lot of things to juggle. And so when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I realize that it's because I'm leaning into what I think I can do and not leaning into the grace and sufficiency of the Lord, that his mercies are new every morning and that his grace is sufficient for me in the day that's ahead. And I just have to continue to be obedient, to continue to get up and set one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. For me, getting up ahead of the kids and spending that time in the Word is so paramount for setting the tone for my day. And it helps me lean into who the Word says I am and not these false labels that I feel. And if I get up and I'm rushed immediately, it's like I'm immediately leaning into that. I am overwhelmed. I am tired. I am this. I am that. The kids have been sick. They've been up at night. Just this morning, I was like, whoa, it's just hitting all at once. I'm like, what do I need? I'm like, coffee. No, I need Jesus. Jesus and some coffee. Jesus with a cup of coffee. That would be the preference. But my point is that when we begin to feel those emotional labels and those wounds and those places, we begin to identify as that blind man, as that angry person, as that overwhelmed person, instead of who Jesus sees us and calls us out to be. So faith does not require us to be perfect, but it does require us to be honest and authentic and transparent before the Lord. Bartimaeus said, "Son of David, have mercy on me." This is a messianic title. He was recognizing who Yeshua was. And he was like, hey, I'm here. Have mercy on me. And that Hebrew word for mercy comes from the root word raham, which is actually the root word for womb. And so when I think of mercy in a connection to a woman's womb, I think of a nurturing mother. I think of the compassion that we have for our children. I think about how we would love and tend to them and how we would do anything for these babies, right? Because that we love them so much. And that is the mercy that Yeshua bestows upon us, even more so than the mercy of a mother or a father or one who nurtures. And so this is what I loved about this. And I just read this and I thought, man, Yeshua, you're so good. I'm going to read it to you. It says, many warned him to be quiet, but he cried out all the more. See, Bartimaeus was determined and he was full of faith. Son of David, have mercy on me. So Jesus stood still. And that's where the story shifts. Jesus heard and Jesus stood still. Bartimaeus could not see Jesus, but he heard that Jesus was there. He heard the voices. He heard the discussion. He heard the chatter. I'm just imagining, but you know that people were saying, hey, isn't that Yeshua from Nazareth? Isn't that, didn't he? And he's hearing all of this. So Bartimaeus lays aside what he does not have, which is his sight, and he plugs into what he does have, his limited ability, which is his hearing. And he subsequently releases what he does have, which is his voice. And he lays that out and he cries out and he disregards what he's hearing, people discouraging him. And what happens? Jesus stands still. Why? Because Jesus heard. Bartimaeus heard. Jesus heard. And what does he do? He doesn't go to him. He calls him. It says, Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. Then they called the blind man, saying to him, be of good cheer. Rise. He is calling you. And that's what I want to encourage you with today. Jesus is saying to us, be of good cheer. Be happy. Be joyful. Get up from that place of affliction. Get up from that place of those false labels and come to him, go to him. Jesus is calling you. And what is he calling us with? He is calling us with an invitation for relationship, an invitation for transformation, an invitation for an entire identity shift. So Jesus goes on, it says, they call the blind man, saying to him, be of good cheer, rise, he is calling you. And throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Jesus. So Bartimaeus immediately lays aside that identity of blind man, of beggar, of someone with a disability, of someone who is less than, of all that he had carried, that cloak, that heaviness. He lays it aside and he goes to Jesus. So again, he responds in faith and he jumps up and he takes action. So what can we learn from Bartimaeus? When we carry those labels and those identities, we have to make a choice to set them aside. I am choosing to lay aside fear. I am choosing to lay aside overwhelm. I am choosing to lay aside that identity that I am not enough. And I'm going to believe the word that I am more than enough, that I am more than a conqueror through Jesus, that I am worthy, and that I am going to give what I do have, which is my voice, and I'm going to cry out, and I am going to respond in actionable obedience. Because see, Bartimaeus could have been put back, and when they said, be quiet, he could have shut up. And when Jesus said, rise, he could have sat and he could have just waited in fear, like, I don't know where I'm going. I can't see. I've got to depend on this crowd to get me there. All of those things. But no, Bartimaeus lays aside that false identity, that identity of a beggar, his provision, all of that. I mean, someone else could have stolen his cloak when he walked away, right? He says, no, I'm laying it all aside to get up and follow you. And Jesus answers him and says, what do you want me to do for you? What do you want me, Son of David, to do for you? What do you want me, the Messiah? Because see, Bartimaeus had already called out who he was. And he asked him, what do you want me to do for you? So what can we learn from this? Jesus is standing there and he is asking you, Megann, what do you want me to do for you? And that's when it has to be that our perspective of who Jesus is, who Yeshua is. Bartimaeus saw him as Messiah. So he knew that he was capable of all things and fully capable of salvation. We've talked about this before, but knowing the names of God, the different names, what do you want me? Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Rapha, Adonai, Son of David. What do you want me to do for you? Do you want me to heal you? Do you want me to transform your identity? Do you want me to be your provision? What do you want? So, and then Bartimaeus had to know what he wanted. And I think so often that's where the enemy snipers us, is we don't even know exactly what we want. You know, when Paul and I are going through exercises in our life where we're trying to figure out a new situation. And we've done this with houses, we've done this with hires, we've done this with business decisions. We lay out a list of 20 or 25 things that we want, that we desire in the situation. These are the skill sets we want to see in this person. This is the kind of culture that we want to build. This is the attributes we want in the house. This is what we want in this business, situation. This is what we want. We get very clear, but you have to take a minute to pause and to reset and to get clear on what you want. And see, Bartimaeus knew exactly what he wanted. In this translation, he said, Rabboni, that I may receive my sight. And not all the translations read that way, but this one does. And what I loved about it is that in this way, you see it, the Bartimaeus recognized it wasn't that even Jesus could heal him. It was that I can receive it. Jesus, that I can receive the removal of that label. Allow me to see myself like you see me. Allow me, I am not fearful. I am full of faith. I am not overwhelmed. I am at peace. I am not angry. I am full of joy. I do not have lack and poverty. I have more than enough. I am a daughter of abundance. I am a son of the Most High. He asked that I may receive because it was already there. He just knew that he had to receive it. And that's what Jesus says to us. He says, I am Jehovah Rapha. I am the Lord who heals you. I am Jehovah Jireh. I am more than enough, the God who provides for you. But can you receive it? And how do we receive it? We receive it in faith, just like Bartimaeus. Then Jesus said to him, go your way. Your faith has made you well. And immediately Bartimaeus receives his sight and he followed Jesus on the road. I love how Jesus sends us on our way. Like he's like, hey, you are healed. Now go on your way. And you're not only healed of your blindness, but you're transformed in your identity. You are no longer blind Bartimaeus. You are no longer a beggar. You are healed and restored. Now go on your way. Go about your business. And what does Bartimaeus choose in that moment? He does go on his way, but his way is following Jesus. He immediately shifts from someone sitting, begging, crying out to one who is following step by step, day by day. Jesus' question, what do you want me to do for you? Changed everything. Jesus standing still changed everything. But all of this happened because Bartimaeus used what he had, which was his hearing, and he cried out. And he continued to cry out in faith. And then Jesus called and said, come to me. And he rose up. He was of good cheer and he went, he listened, and he obeyed. So what can we learn? There's so much to learn, but here we are, right now in these summer months. And it's like, I feel like the Lord is saying, I'm presenting you with an opportunity. Now is the time to get crystal clear on what you do want. Now is the time to get crystal clear on those labels, those false identities that you've been carrying. And when you hear Jesus call and he says, what do you want me to do for you? Know what you want. Lay it out there. Be willing to lay down your old identity, though, to pick up the new, because this transformation process is not cloak upon cloak and layer upon layer. It's laying down what the world has given you, laying down maybe even what your parents gave you, or that teacher that was mean, or that aunt that was cruel, and picking up who Jesus says that you are. What do you want him to do for you? This is a season to get clear on that, and then to recognize that it is our faith that will restore us. It is our faith that will make us well. It is our faith that will allow us to follow Jesus step by step, day by day. Thank you again for joining me today. I hope this message has been encouraging you. I hope that this week that you will take the time to identify those false labels, to get clear on what you want, and to boldly take one step of faith toward following Jesus. I'll see you next week, same time, same place.